All right, so we're delighted to be here, and Dr. Stephanie Stollar is going to kick us off.
Welcome, everybody, and thanks, Amy, for running the slideshow for us today. Our goals here today are to start with a little bit of setting the stage for why it's so important for us to be focusing on the science of reading in higher education specifically. You'll get to hear our story about how our university, Mount St. Joseph University in Cincinnati, Ohio, is currently preparing our undergraduate and graduate educators in the science of reading, but maybe more importantly, how we got to where we are today. We have been perhaps where you are. We would definitely acknowledge how much we have grown professionally, how much we continue to learn about the reading research and learn about how best to transmit that information to our students. And so we hope that our journey will be helpful to you at whatever place you are on this journey, because we are all committed to improving reading outcomes for students, especially students who have learning difficulties or are living in poverty. Those are particular areas of passion for Amy and I. So we want to be able to share resources and support you on this journey as well. So I'm just going to start by setting the stage with some recent data that you might have seen coming from the National Assessment of Educational Progress, that longitudinal picture of how students are doing in reading and math. This is data that you've probably seen over the last several years, where there has not been much growth and not much improvement in reading outcomes for our fourth graders in our country. And the most recent data is indicating the impact of the school closures during the pandemic. And it's even more discouraging and I think more dire now that we can see how our students are being impacted by the disruption to their education. So this really sets the stage for even how much more important it is for educators to be equipped with the knowledge and skills to respond to the current state of our educational system, what students are coming to school with and their current needs. Given the research in reading, given what we know about how children learn to read, about what can go wrong during that process, and about how to prevent reading problems and also intervene when they happen, it really is tragic that we are not doing a better job. So we need to continue to be familiar with that reading research so that we can get better outcomes for our students. I think when we look at data like those and look at the statistics, the sort of tragedy, I guess I would say, of low reading outcomes in our country, it can be tempting maybe to point fingers. And I really want to avoid doing that. What really speaks to me is what I hear from teachers that I interact with, both in my half-time job at Mount St. Joseph University, but also in my other interactions with educators around the country. Teachers tell me that they do not feel prepared to teach reading. They tell me that they didn't feel prepared by their university training program. They don't feel prepared and supported by the professional development that their district provides to them. And this has a lot of negative outcomes. They feel that they are not effective for their students, and everybody goes into education to make a change in children's lives. And it's very frustrating when they don't get to actualize that goal that they have. So not feeling prepared, not feeling effective, and feeling like there's a piece of knowledge that they're missing. And that's really framing the current conversation. I hear this from teachers and from administrators, for that matter, over and over and over again, that there's a body of evidence that we're calling now the science of reading that they feel they haven't had adequate access to, that is sort of sitting out there separate from their training, separate from the professional development that they receive in their district, and they're not able to put that research knowledge into practice for their students. So this is really the change that we're trying to support, moving more towards evidence-based practices to support better reading outcomes for all students. So I wanted to share with you a current definition of the science of reading. This is not just a buzzword or a fad that's going around. There's actually a national definition, and it's really tiny at the bottom, but maybe Christy will send this out with the resources. On the Reading League's website, you can see the full defining guide that elaborates on the definition that's on your screen. And that guide can be downloaded as a free PDF, or it can be purchased as a bound booklet. This definition can now help us all as educators come together around a common definition. This is really important that we're all speaking about the science of reading in the same way, so that we can make that shift from just talking about or learning about research to actually applying it. If we're really clear on what it is, that will help that application and transfer into practice. So you can see some of the elements of this definition that I've highlighted just to really point out the fact that this is not something new. This body of evidence comes from a variety of disciplines within and outside of education, that we have really a preponderance of evidence in some specific areas about how reading develops, about what can go wrong, why some students struggle, about how we can actually prevent reading problems from happening, and when we have struggling readers, how we might at least start to approach their struggles and monitor progress, intensify support for those struggling students, and intervene so that we can turn that around and get better outcomes. So I thought I would just share what I think are the top 5 highlights from the reading research. So this is not scientific, this is my opinion, my reading of the research, my own sort of compilation of the reading research into what I think are some top 5 understandings. So first of all, that reading is a language-based skill. So reading is about transferring spoken language into print. It's about lifting print into spoken language. It is not a visual memory task. It is a language-based skill. And there are many implications of that for reading instruction. So we need to be thinking about the preparation of teachers based in the fact that we have to support especially young children or older struggling readers to develop their capacity for oral language. That is the first essential piece of evidence in the research. A second essential piece of evidence is that reading is not natural. Lots of implications here. This is not something that we can just expect to naturally occur over time. You know, we maybe used to think that if we create the right kind of environment, if we read to children, if they're in a print-rich environment, that when they are quote unquote ready to read, it will naturally happen. And through a lot of research from cognitive science and psychology, we can now actually scan the brains of people before they are literate, while they're learning to read, and after they've acquired literacy. And we can see that reading changes the brain. And in order to become a reader, you actually have to create new connections in your brain between areas that were not evolved for this task of reading, this sort of newer human invention, that we have to create a reading brain, and how we teach can influence that to a large extent. So we should not be taking a wait and see approach. We should not be giving students the quote unquote gift of time, that we need to create a sense of urgency, but also a sense of the knowledge of instructional practices that will create that reading network in students' brains. The third essential finding from the science of reading could be summarized in the simple view of reading, that reading comprehension is the product of 2 broad capacities. word recognition, and language comprehension, that differences in reading comprehension can be explained almost entirely by students' capacities in these two domains, word recognition and language comprehension. So this gives teachers, it gives us as those who are preparing teachers, categories, two big categories of skills that we need to focus on and prioritize. And from those two categories, word recognition and language comprehension, come the 5 essential early literacy skills. Our instruction of teachers in preparation can be centered around those 5: phonemic awareness, the alphabetic principle and basic phonics, vocabulary and oral language, reading fluency, and reading comprehension. So the fourth essential finding, in my opinion, is that we have a lot that can be gleaned from the science of learning. So if you want to think about the science of reading as being a subcomponent of the broader research base that we talk about as the science of learning, there's a lot in that research base that can inform the way we prepare educators in terms of the need for explicit instruction, the need for immediate corrective feedback, the need for lots of practice to move the acquisition of reading through that instructional hierarchy, to move students from being able to first acquire reading skills, then to practice them to a level of mastery, and then ultimately to be able to transfer those reading skills into a variety of new environments, new types of text, new opportunities for writing, for example. And then finally, the fifth category from the reading research that I think we really should be prioritizing in our instruction of educators is the very, very important finding that most reading problems can be prevented. If we are organizing our instructional systems appropriately, if we are emphasizing the right skills that have been found in reading research to be essential, if we are creating systems that support all learners to acquire this very important capacity, that we can actually create readers. We don't necessarily need to be intervening once students have reading problems. We can actually prevent them from happening in the first place. So that's a very quick tour through what I think are some really important priorities. They help us prioritize and frame and focus the training that we're providing to teachers. So if there's something in here that you are not sure about, if you're wondering about, I hope you'll add questions in that Q&A box. And the process of how we have moved our programs at Mount St. Joseph University to be in alignment with these research findings is the piece that Amy's going to share with you next.
Great. Thanks. Well, first of all, just to tell you a little bit about Mount St. Joseph University, we're a small private Catholic university on the west side of Cincinnati, so just outside of the downtown area of Cincinnati. And we have about like 2,500 students total. So again, we're small. And I mention that because I think some of the ways that we've been able to change more quickly is because we're small. And I know a number of people on this call are also at small private universities. And so I think sometimes being small allows you to move more quickly. Sometimes not, but at least in our case, I think that was a piece we had in our favor. So our goal at Mount St. Joseph University in teacher education is, as Stephanie said at the beginning, we are extremely dedicated to closing that opportunity gap, to changing that NAEP data to make sure all children have access to strong instruction that's going to help change reading outcomes for the positive. And as Stephanie said, there's lots of opportunities for reading outcomes to change. And really collectively in education, we're all responsible and we all can have a part in this. And so our goal is really to prepare teachers to be able to implement the science of reading and learning so that all children can learn to read. And as Stephanie said, we're particularly focused on making sure the most vulnerable of our children have access to high quality instruction, because we know if we take care of the most vulnerable, everybody else will be taken care of as well. So at Mount St. Joe currently, just to tell you kind of where we are currently, and then I'll step back and talk to you a little bit about our process and how we got there. Right now, we across the School of Education, from pre-service, undergrad, all the way through our doctoral program, in the School of Education, we are dedicated to the science of reading model and the science of learning model. So for us, it really has spread outside of reading to really infiltrate all aspects of teacher training that we are part of at the Mount. We are really blessed to have a lot of support from administration at all levels, which wasn't there initially, but science of reading has really become our brand at Mount St. Joseph, and even our president can tell you about the science of reading and why it's important, our provost as well. So that has been a really important aspect in terms of getting support for this model and moving forward. We have a number of faculty members and adjuncts who teach reading, and we're all on the same page. So one of the things that we've done that we found to be really important is to make sure we have some common training pieces across our faculty. So all of our faculty is trained in letters. There's lots of good ways to get science of reading training, but this is just the one that we picked. We also use Acadience in a number of our courses. That's an assessment system. That's a really wonderful science of reading assessment tool. And our faculty has all been trained on that. Many of us are mentors. We teach Orton Gillingham both in our undergraduate and in our graduate programs. And so that has been a common thread, again, across our faculty at different levels. Not everybody is fully trained or certified, but we've made sure that that's a common, again, understanding and instructional routine because we use it so carefully within our program. We want to make sure all of our faculty and adjuncts have familiarity with it. The other thing is we are really committed to our continued learning. As Stephanie said, you know, we keep learning about the best ways to help our teacher candidates help children learn to read. So we stay connected. And some of the organizations that we really enjoy being connected to that give us good information is the International Dyslexia Association, the Reading League. Another wonderful conference, if you don't know about it, is Plain Talk that happens usually in February. So those are just some organizations and conferences that we find of value. So currently right now, we are proud to have an A+ rating from the National Council for Teacher Quality, kind of reflects the work that we have done to make sure our program from teacher prep through doctoral work is aligned to the science of reading. So how did we get there? Because I'll tell you, I'm going into my 15th year at the Mount, and we did not start there, far from it. So I was hired 15 years ago to start the Reading Science graduate program. Prior to coming to the Mount, I worked in Cincinnati Public Schools and a local regional resource center that supported teachers in implementing the science of reading. So I was hired to actually start a reading science program at the graduate level. So a couple things that I'm gonna, as I talk through our story, a couple things that we think of that really kind of punctuate our story. First of all, that change will come from the teachers. Teachers have been huge advocates of moving this work forward and have been really the key for our success in terms of changing the School of Education to the science of reading. Connected to that, working with school districts and community partners has been really important in terms of moving our school forward and also making sure that our work at the university is relevant and meeting the needs that we're seeing in schools and districts. Getting everybody on board, making sure our dean, provost, president were supportive of this model so that it could continue regardless of faculty that come and go. So we didn't want it to be the Amy Murdoch, Stephanie Stollar model. We really wanted it to be, you know, the Mount St. Joe model. This is what we do at the Mount. This is how we train teachers, and we all want to embrace it. So making sure that we have that strong administrative support and not just support, but deep understanding as well. So I'm going to start by telling our story, and it's really a story in two parts. As I said, it all started with our Reading Science graduate program, and that's what I was hired to get started. So when I was hired, we had a failing master's degree program. And when I say failing, I mean, I think when I started, we had one person enrolled in the program. It just really needed an overhaul. There wasn't good recruitment happening. And at the time, our dean saw this as an opportunity to bring in some evidence-based practices that could really define that graduate program and also meet the needs of our large school district, Cincinnati Public, that was also moving towards the science of reading and really seeing that as an important way to help change reading outcomes. So when I was hired, the rest of our School of Education was absolutely not the science of reading or the science of learning. It was kind of like we did this in the graduate program and we did very different things in the undergraduate program. And it was a little bit of a hodgepodge because I taught in the undergrad and grad, and my courses were aligned to the science of reading, but my colleagues' courses were not necessarily. So that was a bit of a challenge at first, as I'm sure many people on this call can relate to. So we began our graduate program with one cohort of 11 students. We had a grant that funded those first 11 students, again, in partnership with Cincinnati Public. And then we, just began working with that first cohort. In 2010, we actually formally partnered with Merison Academy and Cincinnati Public. Merison Academy was the professional development arm of Cincinnati Public at that time. And as I said, Cincinnati Public, our largest urban school district, and actually our largest employer at the Mount is Cincinnati Public, because it's just a big district. They were also really trying to move towards the science of reading. So they were very excited when they saw that the Mount had started a science of reading graduate program, and we partnered with them. We actually ended up in 2010 offering courses at their center, Merison Academy, which was more centrally located for Cincinnati Public Schools. In 2013, the International Dyslexia Association started the IDA accreditation program, and we were one of the first 9 to be accredited by IDA. So one of the things I want to share with you about our journey towards the science of reading is, of course, we did it because we felt like it was the right thing to do, and we wanted to change reading outcomes for kids, and we wanted to support what our schools were asking their teachers to be trained in. But the other thing, and this might be, well, I can tell you it was very relevant to our provost and president, is we really saw as we made the change to the science of reading, our enrollment just skyrocketed. So in 2009, we started with 11, and we actually had 8 who ended up graduating from that cohort. But you can see across time, our program nicely grew and grew and grew. And a big reason for that was because this is what our school districts were doing. So our school districts were asking their teachers to be trained in this manner. And we were the only program in the area where you could get the science of reading. In fact, we were one of the only programs across the nation at this time that you could get the science of reading. So we had a number of people call us from other states saying, are you thinking about doing an online program? Might you do an online program? And so after 2011, we decided to start an online program. And I tell you that 100% came out of interest. We're just like this tiny little, Cincinnati regional school, a small private, but we were getting calls across the nation about our Science of Reading IDA accredited program. And so in 2012, we began an IDA accredited online program. And as you can see, that really increased our enrollment quite a bit. And it's been nice and steady all along. And right now we're at capacity. We actually have wait lists for our graduate program. And it's been a wonderful problem to have. The other thing we saw as we started the online program, so this is just with the start of the online program, we were able to attract people from across the country, which has just made our program, its reputation grow, as well as kind of shine some light on Mount St. Joseph University. So currently, as I said, this trend has definitely continued. Right now in our graduate program, we started with just one cohort a year. Now we have 5 cohorts that we start a year. We start 2 cohorts each semester. One time we start just one cohort. So we have a cohort that starts May, two in May, 2 in August, and then 1 in January. So again, we really found that moving towards the science of reading, not only was it important for, our social justice and our equity cause, but it also produced lots of more students for us, and we were able to grow and widen our program's reach. So some really important things with that happened that then led to us changing our teacher preparation program was with this partnership with Cincinnati Public, we were able to have a more focused impact on one school district in our beginning years. And so across 5 years, we trained more than 250 teachers in Cincinnati Public who went through our master's degree program. And they were really having a big impact in their district. Our reading science master's degree students, and these I should step back and say, our master's degree was focused on people who are already teachers who wanted to get that master's degree. And so they were already in the classroom and they were learning things in our program that they were implementing in their schools, and their schools were growing and they were seeing that impact. And so when the Cincinnati Public started hiring reading specialists, they actually gave priority to Mount St. Joe trained teachers because they really wanted that science of reading coaching and training that our graduate students were bringing in. So this was really important, being able to work closely with one district, and a district serving a lot of very needy, vulnerable children. So what about teacher preparation? So our graduate program is growing. We're getting a lot of attention for our graduate program. But our undergraduate was kind of staying the same for a while. And I'll tell you, my colleague and I, Rick Sparks, he was a professor with me at the time, Dr. Rick Sparks. We were the two who were teaching in the graduate program. We had tried a couple times to influence the teacher preparation program, but at least until this part, which I'll tell you about in a second, there was a real value in our teacher prep program to have an eclectic view, so that they liked that Rick and I taught the science of reading, but they also liked that there were other approaches that they deemed important to prepare our teachers with. But I'll tell you what I found from our undergraduates, because I was fortunate to teach an undergrad, and I loved teaching in our undergraduate program, but I came across many confused students. They would say, Dr. Murdoch, in your class, I'm learning that I should teach explicitly and that reading is not natural. We really have to lay it out and show children the path of the code and how language and reading works. But then in so-and-so's class, I'm learning that reading is natural and that explicit instruction is actually dangerous. So it's not just that they were getting mixed messages, they were actually getting contrary messages. And so our poor undergrads, our poor 20-year-olds were kind of left wondering, what should I be doing? So a couple things happened to help change this. So part 2 was kind of changing teacher preparation. And this really, it started in the year before this, but it really started in the spring of 2017 and with gusto. And there were a couple of events that kind of came together to make change happen in a strong way. And we should have started by saying our dean, Dr. Laura Saylor, was going to join us today, and she's presented with us a number of times on this topic. And she had a family emergency, so unfortunately couldn't be here with us this afternoon. But I love when she tells this story, because she really, really was instrumental in changing things, but it was new learning for her because she did not come from the science of reading background. And, previous to this work, she really was of the mind that, variety and eclecticism was a good thing in teacher prep. So a couple things happened. One is we have a teacher summit every year for prospective teachers, high school students who we are hoping join the School of Education or go into education as a field. At our teacher summit, we had the current superintendent of the time, Mary Ronan of Cincinnati Public Schools, speak. And she was going to do an inspirational, being a teacher is a great thing kind of speech. And she did. But at the end of it, she said, now I want to tell something while I have the stage, I want to tell something to the provost and the dean and the president of Mount St. Joseph University. You need to train your undergraduates the way you train your graduate students. We love your graduate students. They're making great change in our schools, and we need to see this change in our teacher preparation. So she gave great kudos to our graduate program, but then also kind of a little bit of a poke at our undergrad that, teachers need to come out of teacher prep with the same skills as our graduate students were learning. So we don't have to retrain people. We can, give them that solid foundation from the beginning. Another thing that happened was Mark Zeidenberg wrote a wonderful book called Language at the Speed of Sight. If you don't know it, it's a great read in general about the science of reading. He's a cognitive psychologist and has great insight just in terms of how we learn to read and the history of reading and all sorts of things. But chapter 11 is all about higher education and the disconnect between the science and the research around reading and what we're teaching in teacher preparation. And I think he does a really nice job laying it out clearly and very accessibly, which other parts of the book are a little bit denser, but I think that chapter particularly is a really nice one that kind of articulates the importance of why we need to move higher education and teacher preparation to the science of reading. So I was able to give that chapter to my dean, who was Laura Saylor, and then also our provost, Dr. Diana Davis, and they both read it, which was wonderful. And we began to have a nice conversation about what was going on in teacher prep and how we can start to move that. So Zeidenberg's chapter, the superintendent speaking, many of you are probably familiar with Emily Hanford's reporting work. She does, if you're not, she's done some wonderful reporting about the importance of science of reading in general and reading education. And she actually, during the same time period when kind of the stars were aligning, she actually audited my graduate course, The Psychology of Reading. So we got a little attention for that as well. And so all of a sudden we began to think about how do we change teacher prep? Another thing that happened is Ohio adopted the Foundations of Reading test that was now required for our teachers, which some of you may have this in your states as well. It is a more stringent test. It's not perfect, but it is a more stringent test and it's more focused on the science of reading than previous licensure tests. So people were beginning to get a little worried. Are our teacher candidates going to be able to pass this? How do we get them ready? So we started having great conversations about this, and our dean was really understanding it in a strong way and getting behind it. We were in the process of creating a dual licensure program, which just allowed us the opportunity to really relook at our courses. So what are we teaching? What is the alignment across these courses? So that really, all of those things kind of came together and allowed us to say, let's revise our reading core. It's time, and let's move it towards the science of reading. As Stephanie so nicely articulated at the beginning, this is not just a matter of reading education. There's a lot of great science about how humans learn and what we need in order to learn things most efficiently. And so we talk about the science of learning. So it was really wonderful when we first began this work. Our whole faculty, not just the reading faculty, did book studies on 2 books that we began to implement very early in our teacher prep program. Visible Learning by John Hattie, which is a nice, I think, easy to access synthesis on kind of the science of learning. What are the high impact research-based, evidence-based practices that we know are effective, and how do we help get those into classrooms? And then also Explicit Instruction by the great Anita Archer and Charles Hughes that really talks about how do we lay out lessons and instructions so that we maximize learning and that we make sure kids have the opportunities to practice, that we have the good language to explain things to children, giving them feedback, all of those good things. So we actually changed our lesson plans across the School of Education so that students, instead of putting theory down, they had to put research down around their lesson. So what's the research that's backing up what you're doing in your lesson? And the Hattie book was one of many resources that they used for that. And then we also changed our lesson plan to outline the explicit instruction lesson plan that Archer talks about in her book. So those were great across the board unifying factors. And I'll tell you, we had some good conversations. Not everybody was there at first, but those were some great conversations that, again, our dean expertly led. She's a great collaborator in bringing people together. And it was nice because she was very vulnerable and learning along with a lot of our faculty at the same time. So we began to really look at our reading core, as well as some of our other courses. And some big themes across this work is looking at explicit instruction, research rather than theory, rid our courses of myths, things like learning styles, things that just kind of get in the way of our teachers implementing effective practices, and a real focus on social justice through strong instruction. So our vehicle for closing the opportunity gap is making sure our teachers are prepared to provide robust instruction right from the start of their teaching career. So we did the work of revising our core, and I'll share with you our website in just a second. We have a Center for Reading Science now at the Mount, and one of the things that we did is Stephanie and another colleague of ours, Beth Corbo, we created a planning rubric that helped our faculty go through kind of what should be in our program and where we teach what and how do we align things. That tool was really important for us to make sure that we were outlining the science and teaching all the pieces we wanted to teach, but also make sure there wasn't redundancy or too much redundancy. A little bit of redundancy can be okay, but too much, and making sure we have time in our program to teach all the things we want to teach by being strategic about who's teaching what. So that tool was a really helpful tool to have some good conversations. So we did that work. We aligned our courses. We did this across faculty. The other big thing that we worked on is we wanted to have common syllabi, because as you all, I'm sure, experience, different people teaching different courses could look very differently. And so we wanted to make sure we did all this great alignment work. We wanted to make sure if I was teaching the course, or if Stephanie was teaching the course, or if Jan was teaching the course, that the bones of the course was the same. Obviously, each professor is a little unique in how they present things, but the objectives, the content, the readings were going to be the same. So we made that our norm. So we had common syllabi that we shared, and that was new for us, because typically the syllabi was my property and I didn't always share it. But now we were saying we want common syllabi, we want to share it. We wanted to make sure any adjunct we hired would teach that syllabus, and would, again, so that our students had those common experiences that we wanted to make sure they had. Kind of where we are right now is we're really focused on field experiences, because one of the things we know is, you can have a great program, but now we want to make sure we're partnering with schools that can, provide those practicum and student teaching experiences that reinforce the good instruction that they're getting at the university. So foundations kind of across our program are listed here, and you hopefully can see some of the things that Stephanie talked about in her essential kind of 5. So really understanding how we learn as humans, information from cognitive science, understanding those essential elements of reading, and we do use the simple view as a model that we share with our students, and then how those essential elements look in effective instruction, and making sure we're having those effective instructional techniques within how we're teaching those essential components. Another key theme in our program that we haven't talked too much about yet is the multi-tiered system of support. So really that application of how do we set up schools to make sure they meet the needs of all children. And that is a key thing that our schools are, a key piece of work that our schools are doing, and we want to prepare our teachers to be able to enter that work. So I want to share with you just a little bit of data, and then I know I'm just about out of time, so because we want to save time for questions. So some impacts. So one of the things that we were really excited about as we started changing our program, there was a great kind of buzz that happened around that. And we actually saw, as we started changing our program, we actually saw our undergraduate enrollment increase. So this is the state of Ohio's enrollment by 100. So obviously their magnitude is much bigger than ours, but the state of Ohio has been steadily decreasing the number of teacher candidates that they successfully put into the field, while at our university, we've been steadily increasing. And we really attribute that to the changes we made in terms of focusing on the science of reading. We get calls all the time from school districts asking us if they can be the first ones to hire our students. I was just in a meeting for a research project I'm doing at a school district, and they said, how can we get your students? Because we know they're trained in the science of reading. That's what we're doing. And we just can never get your students. They have too many choices. They get to go wherever they want to go. And we're small, so we don't produce that many students. So again, we do the science of reading because it's the right thing for children and for student outcomes, but it also produces, increased enrollment and increased satisfaction. The other thing that we saw, I'm going to skip ahead a little bit. The other thing that we saw recently, so now we've been doing this for about 5 years, our persistence rate has increased. We have the highest persistence rate in our area and in our state. And we really attribute that to teachers feeling like they're prepared well. And so they're happier in their jobs. So they're feeling more success. I'm going to step back just a little bit because one other piece that I started to mention that I do want to talk about just a tiny bit more before I turn it over to questions is this whole idea of creating partnerships with K-12 schools. So one of the things that we know is really important is meeting the needs of our local schools and school districts, and in higher ed being seen as a resource to our schools as well. And so we have right now a really strong partnership with a school that's just down the street from us. It's a 3-minute drive from us, but we actually didn't meet them just down the street. We actually were presenting at a conference in Columbus, and they drove 2.5 hours to come and hear us present so that they could come up to us and meet us and say, how can we collaborate? Which was just like a little bit of a shame, but also makes for a funny story. Because they were a district that was more balanced literacy, and they wanted to move towards the science of reading. And in their research, they learned about Mount St. Joseph University that was down the street from them. And they came to this conference to learn about what we were doing. And then a wonderful partnership started. And so we actually worked with them and did science of reading training with them. We now have 2 practicums that we do at their school. And one is a reading practicum where we do Orton Gillingham. And we actually trained their teachers alongside our pre-service teachers. And they work with their students. And it's this really lovely thing where our teacher candidates work with young kids around reading, and then the teachers are reinforcing that same thing. And then we actually just started a math practicum there this year in a similar manner, and our students actually take class at the elementary school and then go and work with the students. So it's been a really wonderful partnership that both has helped us, because we have this great school now to send our practicum students, but also help the school as they're moving their instruction and their curriculum and their training towards the science of reading. So I think those partnerships with our local schools can be really, really powerful. I want to share a couple resources with you that might be of help as you are, at different places, I'm sure, in terms of moving your programs. As we all know, the science of reading across the nation is getting a lot of press right now. And many states have legislation targeting both K-12 and some states targeting higher education, really putting pressure on institutions to move towards the science of reading. And in Ohio, we had that same pressure happening. So Ohio actually started a collaborative where we were looking at how to help move towards the science of reading. And as part of that work, Stephanie, Beth Corbo, and myself, Beth Corbo is another faculty member of ours, we actually created, at the request of the state of Ohio, some model syllabi that anybody can access. The planning tool that I talked about, we also created for the state of Ohio, some resources. So our website is readingscience.org. That's our center website. And all of those tools that we created for Ohio are available for you. The planning checklist that I talked about was the tool that we use to kind of align our program and help us think through what needed to be in each course. And then the model syllabi we actually created for Ohio specifically, but they reflect similar things of what we are doing at the Mount. So if those are helpful, definitely check those out and utilize them as you would like. We would love feedback if you do use them and you find something that you tweaked and would like to share. We are also hoping to bring together a lot of people to share how they are moving towards the science of reading so that we can learn from each other. Stephanie and I have also had the pleasure of working with some people in the state of Colorado along their initiative around moving higher ed to the science of reading, and some other states we've connected with as well. We are trying to put together what we're calling the Alliance for Reading Science. Our idea is we want higher ed to help higher ed. So rather than people who don't know higher ed coming in and telling us what to do, let's learn from each other and share resources, share ideas, share challenges, problem solve those challenges. So kicking off this alliance, we actually have a summit on implementing the science of reading in higher education happening October 19th in Syracuse, New York. It's the day before the Reading League conference, which is a wonderful conference. So if anybody's interested, I think Stephanie's going to put in the chat the link for registration for this summit. I will tell you that the Reading League conference is sold out, but if you wanted to come just for our summit, you would be welcome to, and we still do have some space there, and it's free. The other thing just to know, and why I'm mentioning it here, is this alliance is not just Mount St. Joe, it's lots of different universities who have come together to share and present different things that they have done to help move their schools of education towards the science of reading. And it's all higher ed people talking to higher ed people. So it's not, you know, people who don't understand our world. It's really those who are doing the work in their institutions and want to share and support each other. So after this, we actually, Stephanie and I have plans to kind of create a number of opportunities to keep that momentum going. And we're hoping from this, we'll have more resources to share with the wider community. And again, we will share those on our website, so you can check that out if you're interested. So the planning of the committee, and Stephanie has really led this great work, and she's done an awesome job bringing together different people who are, you know, doing great work. And I can't wait to see what everybody gets to share, and then where we can evolve from there. All right, so I think we have a little over 10 minutes for questions. So I don't know, Christy, if you have some questions from the chat, or if we want to just open it up for questions.
We don't have any questions yet, but feel free to use the Q&A feature, or just type in the chat if anybody has any questions. I have to say that was just as exciting as I thought it would be.
Oh, good.
Okay, we got one in. It says, what textbooks are you using for your undergraduate classes?
Oh, that's a great question. And I can name a few, but then I can also tell you on our website, in each of our courses, textbooks are listed, and in the resource guide, there's also textbooks listed. And that's actually some work we're doing as part of this alliance, is creating even a larger list of textbooks. So one that we really like for the foundations of reading, kind of the first textbook that we really like to use, is The Foundations of Literacy by Susan Smart. And who else is the author on that, Stephanie?
Marty Haugen.
Thank you. I always hate when I forget the second author.
I think it's fundamentals.
You're right,
Literacy,
fundamentals.
Assessment and instruction.
Yeah, and it's listed on our foundation syllabus, but it's a good one.
Then yeah, the next question we have in is, how many hours must your undergraduate education majors complete, and how are you able to fit in 4 reading courses?
Yeah, so this is something that I learned, that Ohio were a little spoiled. I did some national work, and I was like shocked that some states have, you know, no requirements around the number of courses, or they might have 1 or 2, and that absolutely is a challenge. So in the state of Ohio, it is actually required that all universities have a 12-hour reading core. So that translates into 4 semester-long courses. And I know that that is unique across other states. So one of the things that we're doing with our alliance is we're creating different model syllabi that would reflect the diversity that we're seeing in the nation. And so sometimes people have 2 courses. And so what might that look like, still covering all of those standards that we want to cover? And actually in our doctoral program right now, we have them working on a couple different scenarios of different syllabi. So we hope to share more syllabi that possibly could be of guidance for those of you working with a lot fewer courses. I don't honestly know how you could do it in one course, but I mean, you do what you have to do. You could definitely do, some great stuff in one course, but I think advocating for at least 2 would be important.
We got 2 additional questions. One was whether we're going to be sharing this recording with attendees. Yes, we are happy to do so. An additional question, I think they first said that your website's fabulous. They really liked what they saw there. But they're also wondering if they have any questions, how they might reach out specifically to you guys, if you have any avenues that would be helpful for them.
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you for the kind words about the website. I'll tell you, it's evolving, it's brand new. And so keep checking back because we're hoping to put new great things in there. Both of our contact information should be on the website, but I can also put it in the chat and you are welcome. Oh, Stephanie beat me to it. Did you put it in the chat? Yeah.
Yep.
So Stephanie already put it in the chat. So you are welcome to contact us.
We're waiting for more questions. I know that you shared so much interesting information today. One thing I'm kind of curious about while we're waiting for other people is how you might implement practice into your program. Like how do you make sure to emphasize that?
Yeah, that's a great question. Stephanie, did you want me to go or do you want to start?
Yeah, go ahead.
I feel like I'm talking a lot. So, so you'll see in our model syllabi that we tried to include practice in each course to make sure that that was really important. And so, yes, first of all, super important, especially we know with, people who are just learning to be teachers who haven't been in the field, that is really important. So we think about each course and how do we build that in? And so in our Mount St. Joe program, in our foundations course, we have a lot of time where they're going out and observing, and we're putting them in very specific classrooms so that we can help make sure that they see the practices that we want them to see. And so that's kind of our first step, is in our foundations class, really getting them out, seeing these things that we're talking about in class out in the field is super important. And then in our assessment and intervention class, we train them on an assessment that's a good one that a number of our area schools use. And then we train them, and then they go out and they help a school collect that benchmark data. So having that experience. We also try to build into our classes a lot of opportunities to role play. So giving them a set of data and role play. Okay, now you're at a parent-teacher conference. Here's the child's progress monitoring graph and some of the case scenarios that you have. How would you talk with this parent about their child's progress and how we can support them at school? So I think that's really important. And then we do build in 2 practicums within our courses. We have a structured literacy practicum around word recognition skills. That's our Orton Gillingham practicum. And then we also have a structured literacy practicum around kind of language comprehension, which is writing, vocabulary, and comprehension. So where they're actually designing and delivering lesson plans to real children. Super important. And then finally, this is a challenge, and I know we're probably luckier than many, making sure that we're putting them in fabulous student teaching placements, because sometimes what we've seen is we've done all this great work and then they get into the wrong student teaching placement and all our good work is almost undone, because that student teaching relationship, that mentor teacher, is such a powerful force. So we've done a lot of work to try to make sure our student teaching placements are as strong as they possibly can be. And I know we're lucky. We're in Cincinnati, where a lot of science of reading work is happening. I know in universities where you don't have as many schools to choose from, or not as much is happening, that can be challenging. And that was what was really nice about the Oak Hills partnership, is those practices weren't happening in Oak Hills, but we were able to implement those practices kind of through our practicums. So that's another way to kind of get there. If the school's not all the way there yet, maybe you can introduce it through your practicum and then invite the school to join in that training and learning about how to implement that piece.
Okay, we have one last question before we're going to end for today. they asked, we have several partner schools that have adopted the science of reading, but they all use different programs. Do you try to teach the different programs, or do you try to give a strong foundation and then tell them there will be professional development in their schools that hire them?
We don't teach programs. Yeah. And I think that's really important. It's great to have familiarity with programs, but we want our students to be strong regardless of the program that they enter into. And I'll tell you, no program is perfect, right? And so making sure that they understand how to construct and put together and deliver robust instruction is our goal as teacher trainers. And then interfacing with the school and seeing what they're doing has been helpful and important, but making sure that, they can do it without a program.
Okay, we're gonna thank you again so much, Amy and Stephanie. As I already sort of previewed, I was really excited to hear about this journey today, and I think it didn't disappoint at all. We're so happy that everybody was able to join us today. If you do have any questions about anything we saw today, please feel free to reach out to us. I'm going to put Shannon and my emails in the chat. We will be sending a follow-up email, including a recording of the presentation and some additional resources. Please feel free to share either with your colleagues. We are planning on releasing the Reading Foundation Standard in early 2023, and we'd love to chat with you more about how your program might be performing on the standard. We're happy to assist you in any way we can, especially if you're interested in us taking a look at how your programs are currently implementing things, and or scheduling a consultation call with our reading expert that's helping us lead the standard, Linda Diamond. She's worked at CORE and has published some really good, strong textbooks in how to teach the science of reading. Again, thank you all so much. Please, please, please feel free to reach out. And thank you so much to Amy and Stephanie for helping us today. Have a good rest of your day, guys.
Thank you.